This is a presentation for the codes group on Reddit, which is the playful end of cryptography. Hello everybody, this is about John Dee's cryptography on the first two pages of Shake-speares Sonnets published in 1609. So Mr. D, our image of a wizard, his pointy beard and on some of them pointy hats, John Dee. Well, let's just remember who we're talking about. He was one of, I think, 5 people responsible for putting the Gregorian calendar together. He was also responsible for picking all the numbers that we've put into imperial measurements in the 1593 Weights and Measures Act. His Monus Hieroglyphica is perhaps the most celebrated, with Dee's monad, but it's Euclid's Elements, which I just find astonishing. This book was on English grammar school desks for 350 years. We were still using it in the 1920s, and is highly relevant to what we're talking about. Now, 1609 is also one of the most important years in human history, because it's the year that we move into the heliocentric universe. Copernicus has suggested or resuggested this, and he's got some results, but it's being viewed by the church as sort of a mathematical trick. It doesn't really mean that we're at the centre of the universe, that we're not at the centre of the universe. It's not until Kepler does this kind of stuff based on the locus of Mars that we end up in a proper fight. Now, the key point about this, about what enables Kepler to do this, is the development of logs, and he's using Jost Bürgi's logarithms, which were out before 1609, at least to Kepler. This book, of which I've got a little excerpt, is not published until 1620. It's Napier that would publish beforehand in 1614 with a better technique, and the likes of Oughtred, who would invent the slide rule, and Gunter and Briggs, they would bring this to the world. Logs change science, they change mathematics. We can't do astronomical science without logs. So it's all a happening time. It's a bit of a sort of an Einstein meets Picasso meets Schoenberg kind of moment, if you like. Now, Galileo, magnificent figure that he was, would take the Dutch trunk that he got the year before, I think, and make a better one and start discovering things. But Galileo doesn't doesn't discover heliocentricity, and it is Kepler, Brahe, who compiled the data for Kepler without a telescope. It's one of the most incredible achievements in history. He wants to go for a geo-heliocentric world. He still can't bear the idea that we're not. So the sun's going around us, and then everything else is going around the sun. But once Tycho's died, Johannes isn't having any of that. Now, Kepler will not go away from this story, because he has a very famous quote, which if you look it up, you'll get a lot of Freemasons links. It's that geometry has 2 great treasures. Pythagoras and the golden ratio, if you like, which he calls a measure of gold and a precious jewel. So there. Now, Oughtred would go on to publish stuff in English, and is an absolute hero. So let's get on with this puzzle. And the first thing I need to do is demonstrate to you that it is a puzzle. It is puzzling. So let's give it a quick read. To the only, that's a spelling mistake. Begetter, what does that mean? There are dissertations on what begetter may mean. I don't care what word you pick from the dictionary to replace it with. Of these ensuing, spelling mistake, Sonnets, Mr. W.H. Who? I mean, that is necessarily cryptic in any case. What Mr. W.H.? All happinessy, spelling mistake, and that eternity, spelling mistake, promised by our ever living. Why has it got hyphenated? And are you dead? That has been used once and once only to refer to someone that wasn't already dead, and that was to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I when she was nearly dead. I think she's got 3 years left on the clock. And hyphenated again. If I'm having to sell that as a potential, well, as cryptic, then this is going to be an uphill struggle. But it's only when you see the solution that you can be totally happy. Well, news just in, 6 years ago, this was solved, and the trick is that you need to stick it in a spreadsheet. And so we've done that so we grid it, strip out white space and punctuation, and start looking for words. So why 19? Well, essentially it's because it works, but there are 19 T's on that page. T is the 19th letter in the Latin alphabet. I'm going to try and avoid any geometric references, but that is one. And we're really into the Tau cross for numerous religious reasons. And this is the symbol of Royal Arch Freemasonry, and this is called the triple Tau. It's got three T's to it, and it can be represented as 3 T's. If you see 3 T's there, it's code for the triple Tau. Now, I've built a spreadsheet, which is online, and each of the shapes that we've found in here, almost all of which are regular, and almost all T's, some crosses, some letter I's, which are 2 T's if you like, but they're all vertically symmetrical, and so increasing. Many of them are also horizontally symmetrical, but I'm just going to show you 3. The first of which is one of the ones that is not regular. That is an anagram of the Westminster, and it's in the shape of the ground plan of Westminster Abbey reversed. Well, put it on there, looks like it. Okay, I've spun this around in order that I can find something like that. But next to it, which immediately changes everything, is this wonderful thing, which this is an upside down cross, and an upside down cross is a Petrine cross or St. Peter's cross. Now, inside it says I'll use. I'll and then use. Right, so if we swap the S and the Y around, we get I'll sui. Now, any scholar of this era will know that if you stick a dot above the Y, then that makes a th. Right, that's how we used to go TH. So, isn't that weird? I've got cross aisle is a synonym for transepts. That says South Transept St. Peter's, and Westminster Abbey is dedicated to St. Peter. So, and the South Transept just happens to be Poets' Corner. So I'm now talking about Poets' Corner on a poetry book. How odd. Right, so what's next? Well, next to it, in the letter T, is lies here. Lies here. No, I could have said buried or something, but we said lies here. And then underneath that, we've got De Vere. And underneath De Vere, we've actually got fourth, so a kind of a fourth T. We've got triple T here, TH, T on top of the H. If you turn that cross into a T, then you can make that central thing, and that then becomes this triple Tau sign. So I'll show you what the fourth T is in a moment, but I'm suggesting to you that De Vere is the fourth T, and I'll show you why. So let's just read all that together then. Tu and at are there, so to the Westminster, at South Cross Isle, South Transept, St. Peter's, lies here De Vere. Now, in reverse, I've got in Hignell Soc here, IHS, but I'm reliably informed by an independent Latin scholar that there's nothing wrong with ISH. Insigno hoc, to a Latin speaker, is no different to in hoc signo. So, excuse me. And I've got this ish here, and I've got the ish here, and I've got the ish here. And this is, I've even got a validating Vinces Latin verb stem. You can accept that or not, but I've got ish encoded into this 3 times. So that's all looking pretty tight to me. And we've got D in the cloisters. See, they've got a D there, and yeah, bring him in again. There we go. D in the cloisters of Westminster Abbey. Signing it. Now, there's actually another. There are 3 I's. I'm not going to go through this. D has signed his name though across here. D. Yeah, Christe Ellison and Jesum Veritas Venet in 3 letterized 3 I's make a Roman 3, don't they? But what I do want to look at a little bit is this Henry Wriothesley, which is in diagonals Henry and then Wriothesley, but as a lottery ticket, if I want that in a specific point, and I don't care how many different ways you want to spell Henry. We spelt Henry slightly wrongly there, obviously. And there's further on in this encoding, we've got NPi, which is being used for Henri. But I end up with 10 to the 20 using letter frequencies based on the complete works of Shakespeare and the King James Bible. And I tried the Vulgate, and then didn't try the Vulgate, I think. I think you get even worse numbers, you see, even bigger numbers. So that's 10 to the 20. Now we've got to fight back then with the number of different places that you can put a chopped up Henry Wriothesley in diagonals in either direction on this page. And in order to make it simpler to work out, we'll allow wrap overs and what have you. And even with the best will in the world, I can't get that over 10 to the 10. So we've still got 10 to the 10 left. We've still got 10 billion to 1 left on that. And so the gig about Wriothesley is that turns up, and it's premium vocabulary, because that very name is on the Wikipedia page for this publication. So having it turned up, in fact, he's supposed to be who this thing's all about. That's what the HW may or may not be. That's back to front, may or may not be, in the opinion of people going about it the wrong way. So 624, they've got 6 lines, 2 lines, 4 lines. This ratio turns up in De Vere, Earl of Oxford, Edward De Vere, again and again. But let's just take the 6th, the 2nd, and the 4th words on here. We get these sonnets all by ever the 4th T, which at least makes sense, as long as you know what the 4th T is. Now, if you let me muck around with ever to make Evere or Veer even, we can do that, but I don't even care. That 4th T there is the hidden T is in there. And if you drop that down, we get this 4T cross. And if you have a look at that, that's a Master of the Royal Secrets. That's a 32nd Dan Mason, a 32nd degree Mason, and that's his Masonic jewel. Apparently, you get a face mask for that on Amazon. So isn't that weird? If you get rid of the dashes on here and do it again, 624, you get these sonnets all by ever-living, well-wishing T. And we can map that onto these sonnets all by eternal benevolence. I can certainly say that. And if you'll allow me to make T as God, come on, these sonnets all by eternal benevolent. It's asking for God, isn't it? So I'm claiming I've got these sonnets all by God and De Vere as a result of that. Now, if we look at this thing again, it's got triangles, roughly speaking. And I've actually got a little triangle hidden in there, a fourth triangle that's hiding. But I'm interested in this bit in the middle because I can muck around with that. You have to allow me to turn the W here into two V's. The W wasn't called a W in 1609, it was called a double V, and is generally typeset by squeezing two V's together. So if you'll allow me to prise those apart, I can have G VV. Now, De Vere signs his name in some instances, I've seen it, as double, D-O-U-B-L-E, V. He also signs it as VV. So that counts as De Vere. G, VV, the poet, and then Viro Nihil Verius. So what does that mean? Well, that just turns out to be the Weir clan's family motto, but it's also the Veers. I only found this because I was looking for something that I could use without breaking copyright of the Veer motto. And it turns out I've discovered that the Weirs are the Veers. And it means nothing truer than truth, but I don't care what it means. It's just turned up in there. And so I've yet again got by God and De Vere these sonnets. And if I reorder that, or turn it upside down, or just reverse those lines, reading it makes barely any less sense than it did originally, and we appear to have the Ryder Cup on the top, or it might be a Roman funerary urn. It was the done thing to set your dedication to something in a funerary urn in some kind of shape like that. So that's to a scholar. That's like, oh. So what does all this mean? Well, it means we need to start taking this page seriously, and these two lines, which meant anonymous in 1609 and will continue to do so for 3 centuries into the 20th century. Now, okay, pulling apart page design in this era is somewhat futile. They do change fonts and font sizes and put full stops where they shouldn't be, fairly willy-nilly, but nevertheless this thing is riddled with errors and has got far more space. Normally all this stuff is shoved together. Why have we got all this space and space again and space again? What the hell's going on? But we've got a broken P, we've got a broken R, we've got to change typeface, change font size, printing error, another printing error, there's an indistinct full stop. Is that there or not? This is centered on the S's, so that's why you wanted to hide that. But just put a full stop in. Drop font size again, lowercase, uppercase, misplaced I point. That I is not where it should be. A typesetter would notice that. I'm obsessed with full stops. You'll see why shortly. And then we've got these 2 blank rules. What are the blank rules? Change font size again. Now, this baseline is irregular. The baselines everywhere else are not irregular. Why is that baseline irregular? Why is lon and n dropped? I actually don't know. What's this? We changed font size up again, and we've got a pretty nasty B there, which we'll have a look like in a bit. We've got a massive full stop, bizarre T, and another weird T, and too much space, and a very funny A. What on earth is that? And then a really crap S, and then that's not centered, and yet another unnecessary full stop. But in general, so the point is that this is riddled with these strange errors. What are these errors? And I can show you a clone page which has replicated these errors. So we know that that they're, if you like, they're deliberate errors. You need to put them in if you're trying to clone the page. Now, there's just print run errors. So let's get on with this geometry. And it was discovered by Alan Green 6 or 7 years ago that these two massive full stops form the diameter of a circle, which intersects several of the points on here, and that these circles have specific properties. Now, what we're going to build here is a rule generator, a horizontal anonymous rule generator that will define these two lines. So they're kind of defined already on this end by the ends of this circle. I mean, you'll notice already this blue one's actually hanging over a little bit, but it's supposed to end there, according to the theory. But the fact that it's out is relevant. And then we end up with this square, and we're going to apply loads of stuff in the square. Everything within the square is, on its own coordinates system, if you like, its own reference. The square needs to be adjusted, needs to be shifted a millimeter and contracted a millimeter in order that we can do the whole thing with just the initial 2 points. Right, and so that's my point, that this is a mathematical model, that there's 2 input points in principle, and then you do then need to give me refined points for the lower rules, left and right, but that's it. There are no other points. I'm not going around and going, well, let's make this line go through this point. None of that is happening. They've got 2 input points, and then you need to know pi and phi and 3, 4, 5. So those 3 triangles are not equilateral triangles. Everything else on it, all the other angles, all the angles in the top are essentially 18, 30 or 36 degrees. And so I've only got 2 other odd angles, 21 degrees and 51 degrees. And well, you can see what I think they are if you can read that. So all that stuff is online, and I'll give you links to it later. The link to the spreadsheet that shows all the Cardano stuff and the workings for the geometry. So let's get on with these circles. So the first circle is pi, which would be named pi in just under 100 years' time. Or the ratio would, by an Englishman, and actually the circumference was called pi by another Englishman earlier on at the end of the 17th century, but we're just calling it the ratio of the diameter to the circumference of a circle. And so that's what the tangent value of this is. The tangent is pi, and that means that if we stick a circle on the end of it, that the circumference of that circle will equal the length of the long side. And so we can roll that down the hill, and it'll have turned 360 degrees by the time it gets to the bottom. So that's good. Right, so now our second triangle is a Pythagorean triangle with sides of 3, 4, 5, which is nice and simple. Got a tangent value from here of 4 over 3, obviously. The only problem is that our dot isn't anywhere near it needs to be. If we're going to have that kind of difference, yeah, we can make absolutely everything need to be much, much closer than that. But it does look like it's got a pi tin stuck on the top of it. And so if we stick a TP on the top of that, then we're kind of on the circumference of the circle. We're tangentially out a little bit again, but we're within a millimeter of where we need to be. So that's good. So that's our second triangle, and then our third triangle is phi, such that the short yellow side forms a golden ratio with the short green side. And so geometrically, we can show that by, if we put a pentagram fitting there, this should actually go through the G, but this is just a cheap animation I've added on. The length of the yellow line there is equal to that line across that golden triangle forming part of that pentagram. Now, that's where our phi triangle should that's where it is, and so our dot here, our 9 dots, the center of it should be there, and we're not. We're only just on the edge. We need to be much better than that. Now, because of the shifting and contracting of a millimeter, we'll be contracting about half a millimeter here because we're halfway across, but we'll stop a shift a millimeter. We end up predicting almost exactly where the center of that should be. It's slightly off the diameter, the radius of the circumference of the circle, but we've now managed to predict where this is without looking at the page, if you like. Without using anything on the page, we've now predicted that 9 dots, which I'm chuffed to bits about. And we'll show you where that goes later. Right, I need 5 construction lines to generate the horizontal rules. That's the first one, which is a horizontal line that goes straight through those 2 dots there from the center of the G. Excuse me. If we then draw a line from the corner of the phi triangle to the corner of the pi triangle, we will go straight through this Thorpe dot here, which has got a dad's army arrow pointing at the funny A, but there's a circly thing on one side, and we're going straight through that circly thing really quite perfectly. This other line is going to come along in a minute. That's another construction line, but that's pretty good. And then we need 2 more. This is the tangent to that point on the diameter, so obviously the perpendicular line to the diameter, and this is a chord which is parallel to that. Now, this line here is defined by me as being horizontal and coming from the pi triangle. So all we need is this line to cut it off, and that will tell us where that line should end. Well, it ends here, so that's a little bit out. But looking at the page in sort of small scale, or large scale rather, it's. Nobody's really noticed that, but it's not actually in the right place. But it's close enough that you can look at it and go, well, yeah, this looks like what was intended. Now, that blue line is where my magenta line goes through the A. There's a deliberate full stop that's been pressed onto the top. We're only just skimming it. But if you draw the line from the 9 dot to where that is there, the A is perfectly in line with that. This dot here is. This line doesn't run along the side of this A. It goes through this dot here. So that's good. So finally, right. So this lower line, we've no way of knowing how high it is. We only find out when this yellow line from the Pythagoras triangle and then through this Thorpe dot we defined, if we then carry that on, where does it end up? Well, it ends up here, and you can see quite an obvious, full stop kind of sign, rounding at the end of this really crap line. It's deliberately obfuscated. Rules are fairly crap, but this one is extra rubbish. And again, we're in this kind of diagonal amount from where we need it to be for the second half of this. Now, news surprise. This page is built from the top down, so I actually need a point on here, not down here, to be able to build it. And these points are the pistils of these 2 flowers. And I don't care if you think that's just picking points. Once you've been playing around with this, that is standing out as a point. So, but again, even if you're pulling a face at my flowers, this. If you stand back, this looks as though it's bang on. It's so once we start doing it properly, we're a teeny little bit out, and we need it to be. We need to know exactly where things are for the accuracy that we need for what's coming next. And so similarly, that's the predicted blue line. But if you look at where he's actually got things on there, he's lined this T up to fit with what's actually on there. Now, just to finish off on this bottom thing, if you've ever wondered why does it say at London, you don't say at London anymore, do you say at Lancashire, at England? It's all to do with Aleph and Tav, which are the beginning and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and in the Old Testament in Hebrew it talks about I am the Aleph and the Tav, if you like. In Greek, that translates, the last letter in the Greek letter alphabet is Omega, so that translates that I am the Alpha and the Omega. And we are taking the beginning and the last construction lines to intersect this town, which I find quite cute, but it's just a little thing. Kid. So that's good. So we've got all these things. We've got 3 circles. I've got 1 circle there, so I guess the other 2 circles here they go off the page. So that's okay. But I've defined my blue line, and so I can move on to the next level of the game, and we can draw this square. After we've played around with it a bit and we've adjusted it, so we've got a square that fits very nicely. The length of this fits just underneath here, and it goes through the 2 S's here. So let's go and see what else we can find. Now, in order to do, this wasn't the first thing. I found this. Well, I found it fairly quickly, but what we need to do here is draw a pyramid of 51 degrees. Why 51? Well, it's 3 times 17, which is nice, but it's also the rounded down integer value of the slope of a particularly large building in the Middle East. So, and then on top of that, I'm going to plonk 2 equilateral triangles that terminate on the square here, and we can go and have a look now how close we are, how well positioned are these S's. And that's the left S, not too bad, but should be a little bit further in. This is the right S, very good, but you'll notice right next to it is that inverted dot there. That is not an accident. That's where he's intending you to be. Now look at the middle S rather. So that's a very important point. That middle S here is a little bit off. Right, he hasn't beautifully centered the middle S, but that is in there. Whether or not it needs shifting, I don't know. Is that an encoded error? I don't think so. I think it's just in the wrong place. But it's very difficult to get to the bottom now of this. Now, if you just look at what happens with the upper side, it goes straight through the eye of these 2 rabbits. They're hares and are closely associated with Viz insignia. And then the girl, I thought we were trying to punch the girl on the nose, but we're not. It looks like we're trying to hit her in the mouth, which would make more sense on a poetry book, I guess. And then this centre line hits the 6, absolutely bullseye, as does the circumference of the circle. This is a donut that's been put on there The O and the 9 in particular is an absolute mess. But this 6 is so nice. The circle in there is so nice, and we've hit it absolutely bullseye. So that's good, right? And then we've got an equilateral triangle. Now this is where the kind of the symmetry thing arguments come out. Oh, sort of course it is. We all center things. Well, all right, but you need to center it at 30 degrees. You might be able to find that, and people do center things, and they line things up on the angles of Y's and stuff like that. And I've seen that. But this is exactly 30 degrees, but it's not just exactly 30 degrees. That exactly 30 degrees goes straight through this little dot here that's been moved up and is in a strange shape. What is that? Why is it cut off at the neck? But that's intended. It may have another role, but I think it's just intended to validate this. But is that, I don't know what that is. Up to you to decide. But we've got also these little marks here, and I'll show you in the clone copy that those are regarded as deliberate errors by the cloner. But if you look at them, they've got little signs on. This does that. I don't know. Is this an attempt at the Bluetooth logo? What's going on here? Yeah, I believe that on scholars, but that definitely does mean something. That's not just arbitrary rubbish. So moving on, so we've got 3 circles, we've got 3 triangles, 3 circles. Great. So let's start looking for pentagrams next, and this is our big pentagram. This is the largest vertically aligned pentagram that we can fit in there. Touches the bottom, touches the sides, and it turns out that it hits the A perfectly there, and in fact that A is a golden triangle because it goes down the other side and hits that perfectly. So all good. So we've got a large pentagram that intersects with our geometry. And we've got a medium-sized pentagram, which is defined as this point is the intersection here. It's an inverted pentagram. There's nothing wrong with inverted pentagrams. In 1609, it would only be the likes of Crowley that would muddy all that. No references to specific evilness of an upside-down pentagram in that era. But it's defined as that. So we draw a 36-degree line from there to this line, and where it hits it, which is here, that is where the corner of our pentagram should be, and then we reflect that to get the length. This pentagram does not hit the magenta lines at the top. It's very close, but it doesn't hit it. And we can now see how close we are to the centres of this S. We're not too bad there, but we're a bit high, and we're a little bit, this S is should be a bit across. Again, I don't know. That dot there is deliberate. I don't know about that dot. I haven't decided about that. I've only just noticed that. That may or may not be, but it's there. That dot, in my opinion, is already too big to be rubbish. So good. So we got our second pentagram, and here's our third pentagram, and this one is thankfully the right way up, and it defines the baselines of Shake-speares and of sonnets, but is nicely clips these two, but is defined as the length of the small pentagram is equal to √2 minus 1 times the length of the square, which more descriptively means that the length of the small pentagram plus the length of the square is equal to the diagonal of the square. Isn't that fantastic? So all our pentagrams are well defined, so within the geometry. and if you're going to look for your own, you're going to need to do that. You're going to need once you've found your other pentagrams, you need to show me what nice relationship there is between that and your other ones. So 3 pentagrams, 3 circles. So with all these pentagrams, it's about time we introduce you to Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, and his crest that's got a pentagram in the top left quadrant. So that kind of suggests, so this pentagram here is not part of the geometry, it's just, it's in your mind's eye that there's an O that appears to be in the middle of where we might have a square. So have we got any squares around there? Yeah. So the distance between the midline of Shakespeare's and the midline of Neuer is, it means never, of course, is exactly half the width of the square. Fancy that. So that means the other ones fit in all nice. And this T has been adorned. It's been both points both serifs are clipped, and T is a very special character to us and implies a town cross. And, again, it's like, well, of course, someone would do that. I'm sorry, people don't do alignment to that level like that. Like that's if you've got one of these, you can find me a square like that on some stuff. I'd love to see it. Things are close, but there's no cigars. Okay, so we got 3 more circles. And I'm now going to put on my tau cross, which I'm going to define as being along the if you like, the blue line along the horizontal line of the middle pentagram, which is below the center point of this here. This sonnets is not halfway between these two. The midline of it is not halfway between these two. But you could be forgiven for thinking that it is if you weren't looking for the pentagrams. It's defined as being along that line, and then the other side of it. So from the 9 dot up to here, and the other side of it is just reflected. It's just going to end up in space. But I don't care. This side is from halfway across, and then I'm going to go halfway across that. That's the same distance rather across there, which will be more than halfway of this. And I don't care if it just ends up in the middle of nowhere. But it's not in the middle of nowhere, as it turned out. That's our pentagram in black, and if we extend the diagonal, it hits this fairly well. I'd like that a little bit further up, but it's pretty well on. Why that full stop is that weird shape, we know not so far. But I've also got this freckle here, right? Now it turns out that my tau cross has got an absolutely identical x coordinate for the center of that thing. And we're not far out on the y coordinates, are we? So the whole thing may have to come down a teeny bit. Isn't that amazing? I think it is. I mean, to get to that, we've had to cartwheel round the entire diagram using nothing more than a pair of compasses, and you had to give me 51 degrees. But apart from that, it's all dead simple tape drawing. And we've got another cross here. So we've got a cross through Shakespeare's and down through there, and finishing on the 6 dot. Isn't that astonishing? Well, it's not too astonishing, we've always seen it, but this one has got very high geometric value. So that's the end of the squares thing. These 2 crosses are taking us into the final of the 3 puzzles that we've got here. I call this the 3 puzzles of 3 threes. So we'll put our circle back because we want to reflect this line here about the y-axis and about its center point. So we're just going to shuffle the x and y coordinates of these 2 around, and come on. So, and if we do that, and then draw a yellow line right up through there, we get a Cairo, right? We get a Cairo symbol, and that's because that hits the cerise of the P. But if we, so this needs to be scaled and shifted accordingly. And so if we do that, we won't be quite on the stem of the P, but we'll be a lot closer, right up the line of it. Now, just looking at what happens to the U, we're touching the U. We're not quite touching the R, but actually, if you extend that line down, I mean, I've terminated that on the circle. If you extend that, we actually don't. We only just. We might hit a pixel of it if you extend that down. That E has got filled in. There's that's not. It doesn't look like one of the Mr. Men for nothing. There's a reason for that. So. So that's good. And then if we draw a line across the bottom here, put that construction line in again, the horizontal line from the G that goes through the two T dots, we get a Petrine cross, and there is if you look at that, you'll notice I've got two lines there. This other line, which is also, this is the pink line here. That doesn't go through here, does it? So it's just saying, well, all lines will go through dots. No, all lines don't go through dots. They don't go through dots like that, right? Bullseye, particularly when they're at an angle. Right, now, I just want to look at these endpoints of this chi, because it starts off with by G, which in Freemason speak can mean by God. In the middle, that's a plus sign. DE, VE, RE. And that's the third time we've done it. I know they've all been a little bit of a squeeze, but not too much. Right? It's considering how much extra stuff there is on here, and it has to hide in plain sight. That's for 400 years. That's not too bad. Now we've also got this is a large full stop, so it's not as big as this one, but it's at the bottom, but it's still pretty massive. Yeah, what could that mean? And the grain of the paper is interfering now, so how much detail we're going to get out. But that appears to be a triangle again, doesn't it? I wonder if it's at an angle. I don't think it's supposed to be vertical. And we got an extra couple of lines still to go, a couple of specials. So this A has got a notch on it. It's got a claw on the end. No, that's not some kind of weird printing error. Right, this one doesn't have it. If you put the two of them together as transparencies, this one is out, and it's healed up along this here as well. It's an extra 2 or 3 degrees, I'd say, extended, right? Now, so I've got my circles there, and here I've got my big circle. Well, I've got a big dot, which I've got if you draw, it's shaved off on one side. So if you try and measure that roughly, you get about 20 degrees. So let's draw a line at roughly 20 degrees, and that should, but then when we get there, we'll find out what the angle actually is, and then we'll put it into the computer, which is what we've done. And that angle is in fact 21 degrees. And if you draw a line, a vector line from the center of that G dot at 21 degrees, it goes through the center of the claw. Right? I mean, that's straight through the middle of it and straight up the back of the A. So I don't know if it's Kepler's supernova, but Kepler's supernova went off in 1604, and that's when De Vere died. So if you wanted to say it's 1604 really, then that might be a nice thing to put on your diagram. Now, finally on all this, we've got this R and the B at the bottom. This B is particularly horrible, actually, and I'll show you a comparison. It's nice. I think this whole B's been made by hand. But we've got this. What we've got with this B is we've got we've got this square serif at the top, really squared off, and then on the bottom we've got this kind of blobby serif, not very much serif at all. So what are they about? Well, if I take the exact point of this at the corner of these squares, and I go at 30 degrees down, and I terminate it on the line that goes through these T dots, then I end up right slap bang in the middle of this proposed B dot. So that is one of these. So ain't that a thing? And in the other direction, we end up here on the R. Yeah, I've scarred my copy of the sonnets. I need to stop doing this. But that says or but or for Ballon d'Or, so maybe have something to do with football. Who knows? Or maybe that's got something to do with where we're going to put that, because I can't find that, and I'm absolutely convinced that it's in there. So we've got quite a few dots to play with now. So I'll have another look at whether or not those things can be worked into the geometry in a regular fashion. So why are we doing all this? Well, we mentioned the South transepts, and which is Poets Corner, which is here, and if we go and stick our circle on there, we'll put our Petrine cross on. We've got this point down here, right, by the looks of it. So let's just have a kind of look at what that means on the diagram. So yeah, we've got the centre of our Petrine cross, and we've got this D for T here before it. D with a weird T, with a weird kind of ox-shaped T, you know, a taurine T. T does come from the tau, of course. So that's D for ox. Yeah, Oxford. Now, I have seen in other publications Earl of Oxford of the era, Earl of Oxford, and then okay, D for T turns up all over the show. That's nothing remarkable about that. But yeah, not the D here, but further on, and then D for T, but then vertically, perfectly set D for T to make a nice little cross, and that is not normal. And there's several instances of that occurring, where you know Earl of Oxford is or some other reference to De Vere is on the same line as that happening. So what was that in 1609? What was this point that's this ox-shaped T is just by? What you know? Where is Oxford? Well, it just happens to be there. That's halfway between the last two columns of the South transept. If you zoom that in, when it was built, it had 17 spears all the way around it, which unfortunately have been taken down. They must have rusted, and nobody knew what they meant, so they just threw them away. Now, he's in a Cairo stance, you could argue, but you could also argue that that's just Alexander Pope, the guy that put this together as a raving Freemason, and so he's wanted to do that. It also could have a 4 and an X, though, simultaneously, and that would give us 40, wouldn't it? There are 40 notches. You can't see them on this picture, but there are 40 notches across the top here. There's 17 notches up here. Obviously, there should be a lot more than 17 notches. There should be more than 20 notches, shouldn't there, to get halfway across that. So these notches are necessarily bigger, but you wouldn't notice unless you counted them. So the Freemasons put this here 20 years after they'd built the wall behind there and they'd bagged this space and said nobody should build here. So that's odd, isn't it? They then waited 20 years until the year of our Lord 1740 before they bothered to put this thing there. How odd. So to conclude with the geometry, here this G dot is so big that I'm going to designate it a circle because I need 3 circles, at least 3 circles or 9 circles on each of these. So I've got that, and here this D is which is raised and has 2 crosses of religious intent straight through it, is also in the centre, in the middle of this isosceles triangle, which could be construed as being a delta. And delta dot is how John D sends his signs his name, of course, and that dot is the beginning and the end of everything on this page. Okay, so if you want to play this at home, folks, you need to know that there's a pirate copy on the market which doesn't work, right? You'll get stuffed if you buy one of these. So this is trivially shown to be these two to be quite different, but intentionally cloned. So you find out straight away, right at the top of the page, no way is that girl going to turn into that girl. I am going to get from the British Library a better resolution copy to do this again in more detail, but no way. But the letters just aren't the same. That P is not the same as that too fat there. But he's replicated the error, so that you won't find a typeface in this era where people have done that. That is a gap. It's not the same as that gap, but he's mimicked the error. And interestingly, these S smudges, which I really wasn't sure whether or not we can accept those. Well, we can, because he's put them on here. Now I doubt where he's put this detail in, but that they're marked. And then he's turned this full stop into a proper full stop and then screwed the centering up by including the dot. Now we've got an end dot here, we've got a dot here versus a Christmas tree bauble there, but it shows that he's replicated it. And then we've got actually these 2 dots are too large, but he's seen that that's a bit weird, and has decided that, we'll put 2 big dots in next to it. So nowhere near the same. Now the point about that, I mean, this guy dies 120 years ago, but I got this quote from someone who'd written something just a couple of years ago. So he may be dead, but his word lives on, and he is a prime example of the level of science and scholarliness that you will find in this Shakespeare stuff. Well, certainly in terms of working out who he is, God knows what they've been interpreting is. So let's see what Solomon Lazarus, call me Sidney Lee, editor of the Dictionary of National Biography. He's the most important, most powerful historian in the country between 1891 and 1911, has to say about this. The booksellers arranged that one half of the copies should bear one of their names in the imprint, and the other half should bear the other's name. The even distribution, there's 4 of one and 9 of the other. I don't know how many of the 9 turned up in the last 100 years, but I can't imagine that many. I don't know, but the even distribution of the 2 names on the extant copies suggests that the edition was precisely halved between the 2. Even if I got 4, right? I mean, I can't have more than 4. of the right one, that is not enough to extrapolate like that. But the last line, the practice was not uncommon, and that actually angers me more than anything else, because okay, this bit is just bullshit. He hasn't bothered to read it, but this bit he's just made up, right? There are no instances, I put it to you, of anybody ever doing this. Whenever Stanley has seen it, if you look closely enough, there'll be two imprints. You just don't do this. You put the two publishers on the bottom if you've got two publishers. Everything you say, Stanley, is rubbish. Right, now the thing is that's kind of the story in Shakespeare land, from people who really should be making more of an effort. On the left is the complete and unabridged works of William of Stratford, and in manuscript form. We cannot find any other marks from this guy. He was a glover's apprentice at 13, so I don't know how much grammar school he's supposed to have done, but it looks like he got permanently excluded. And on the other side, we've got yet another of these cryptic things, which is in fact a Cardano, and was solved even longer ago than 6 years. I think 7 years ago. War managed to work out that this says go to Westminster Abbey. This is not the original. There is in fact a drawing of the original, and there's a bloke that looks a bit like Vinnie Jones there with a wool sack who's been put there. But they decided that we'll get rid of that and we'll put somebody with a quill and a balloon for a head, and claim that it's a good likeness. In this cryptic stuff, it says "read if thou canst," and then we've got 4 T's here, both as a result, the 2 T's both as a result of spelling mistakes. It's just screaming out. All that was put there by Ben Jonson. There's been an authorship question since the first folio was published, because people went up there and they could not find anybody. They couldn't find anybody there. No one had ever met. They didn't know what was going on. And no one had ever met Shakespeare, the poet in Stratford. Nobody in London records meeting Shakespeare at all, or this Shakespeare. A Shakespeare that is a poet. No, there's no letters. Nobody ever says, "I met that Shakespeare." Nobody describes him. What never was will not easily be found. That's what Ben Jonson said when being quizzed in later life as to why the heck we cannot find anything. What does that mean, Ben? Honest Ben, I understand, was one of his nicknames to himself. So it can't be Stratford, and we claim that it's De Vere. But why all the secrecy? So let me introduce you to William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, and he's wearing the most expensive pair of curtains ever made, and that's because he's got all the money. I think when he died, he's the richest guy in the country, and I think most historians agreed that basically, he's wearing the trousers here. It's he that tells Elizabeth what she can and cannot do. I mean, she can muck around with her friends all she wants, but in terms of what we do as a country, that's down to Lord Burleigh. There's quite a bit of catastrophe involved as a result of his stewardship, not least a war with Spain. Now, Burleigh would be outlived by Elizabeth, and in 1601, the Essex Rebellion would occur, in which Henry Wriothesley, who you've already met, would be involved. Now, the Essex part of the Essex Rebellion, Robert Devereux, would have his head chopped off within a few days of this going on. We've got a short court case, but justice is swiftly meted out, But Henry here has to stay Henry Risley has to stay on remand in the centre of the Tower of London until Elizabeth here has on and has been replaced by a Scottish guy, and at that point he is released. And the gig here, you see, and why he's being let off, but also what all this kind of secret is, and what the royal secret is that the Masons are keeping, is that this lady just turns out to be this guy's mum. So I'm afraid I've taken your grammar school boy off you, and now I've taken your virgin queen away. Defiled her. So, and just finally on this historical thing, so Robert Cecil is responsible for cleaning up the Essex Rebellion, sticking James Stuart on the throne, and then in 1605 orchestrating what we call the Gunpowder Plot. I mean, all these people were intending to do it and were extremely gullible, but the idea that we do in fact allow the cellar, the undercroft of the Palace of Westminster is to be used by all and sundry, that it's a warren of buildings and nobody knows what's going on. It's total rubbish, and I've just seen that, people giving historical accounts of this saying, oh yeah, well, it's perfectly natural. Absolute rubbish. Cecil knew exactly what was going on, certainly from the very second that these people stepped foot in the compounds of the Palace of Westminster, and probably long before. And he's feeding James Stuart messages and saying, oh, what does this mean, Jim? And Jim's going, maybe they're trying to blow me up. Now, James Stuart would be particularly worried about being blown up on account of the fact that this guy, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, was blown up in 1567 when James Stuart was just 7 months old. Henry Stuart was James Stuart's dad, and this must be freaking him out no end. Now, in view of the authorship discussion about that, once they've rapidly run out of evidence, they'll throw Macbeth at you. And so Macbeth is dripping with the Gunpowder Plot. Ask to see the evidence. Ask to see why they say that. And just be horrified at what dripping can mean, particularly in this context. That it was well known that people get blown up with gunpowder. So that's all. I hope that has fired the enthusiasm to look at this in detail by at least a couple of people on the 75,000 subscribers to Reddit codes. I've got a tiny Facebook group called Delta Dots that Jay and I communicate in, and I will respond to as best as I can to anything on Reddit and anything in the comment section below, should you be so kind. Comments of all kinds are accepted. I'm quite happy to have a flame war with people if you want one. With thanks to War on a number of levels, War decoded the Cardano, which was quite an achievement in my opinion. Alan Green found the circle, and War found the Cairo on that circle, and Hall Carpenter has been my good buddy over these last few weeks, and is indeed co-discoverer of a number of the parts in that square. And I'd just like to shout out to David Shake-speare and his fantastic presentations. He's the art department of DVTV, and John Anthony is the torchbearer of the cryptography, and could do with some chums and some peer review and some extra eyeballs. And Glenn Alexander from here in the UK is also, I'm not actually in the UK, but spiritually I'm in the UK. And Glenn Alexander is also worth looking at, although he's a bit verbose. So that's it. This is De Vere. I'm quite sure it's a picture that's in the Folger Library, which we'd really like to have a closer look at, because this has all been mucked around with. And I don't know if I told you, but those two lines meant anonymous for 300 and more years. So you're supposed to just, when you know who it is, you're supposed to fill it in. Edward de Vere was here. Thanks for listening.